Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
You were never my choice. That was her voice, echoing in my head over and over as I stared at the photo on my phone. She was wearing that wide-brimmed straw hat I'd bought her during our last summer vacation in Maine. Only this time, the hat was tilted just enough to hide half her face, her lips half smiling at the camera. And in her arms, some other man's child, a boy of about 10, grinning too close for it to be just a friendly hug, while Rachel, my wife, pressed herself against him in a way that made my stomach turn. It wasn't our son. It wasn't one of our kids' friends. It was a complete stranger to me, a piece of someone else's life that had suddenly invaded mine. I blinked hard. The phone screen dimmed, as if it wanted to spare me the sight. But I tapped it again, and the image flared back to life, the corners of the picture sharper than any memory I'd known. My throat constricted, and I realized I was gripping the phone so tightly my fingers shook. In the background of that photo, some half-luxurious resort, a pool with palm trees, lounge chairs, people sipping drinks with little umbrellas. Not Maine, not our backyard, not any place I knew. Just an unfamiliar world into which Rachel had seemingly slid without my knowledge. She'd said that line, "You were never my choice," just a few hours before, in our kitchen. She spat it out like the coldest truth of her life. At first, I thought I'd misheard. Because how could she say that to a man she'd been married to for nearly 15 years? But there was no mistaking the bitterness in her tone or the finality in her eyes. I remember looking down at the cheap laminate flooring, noticing a coffee stain we never quite wiped up properly, and wishing that time could stop right there. That maybe if the universe froze, I wouldn't have to keep listening. She'd been scrolling through her phone, that same phone I now held in my hand, rummaging through newly discovered corners of her digital footprints. That was how I found the photo. That was how I found the rest. And in that moment, all I could think was, this is a nightmare. This has to be a nightmare. But it wasn't. I'd had suspicions for a while. Sometimes you sense a fracture in your marriage without being able to name it. The slight distance in a hug. The forced smile in the morning before coffee. The text messages she got late at night that she dismissed with quick, curt, "Oh, it's just work" explanations. The new lingerie I never got to see. She was drifting in front of my eyes. But I told myself it was stress, or maybe I was reading too much into her restlessness. I chalked it up to midlife dissatisfaction, or a temporary slump. Because that's what you do when you love someone, right? You rationalize. You find reasons for their changes, hoping it's just a phase. Then a friend sent me a screenshot, Rachel, in her hat, on a dating site. Nothing overt, just a profile labeled "Hot Wife," looking for new sparks. But the photo was enough to punch the air out of my lungs. And the caption, "Adventurous, open-minded, bored at home." Bored at home. The words hammered at me. There was no room for me to misinterpret that. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. I confronted her one evening after the kids had gone to bed. I remember how quiet the house felt. Every little sound turned enormous. My heart pounded like a drum when I stepped into our bedroom. Phone in hand, the screenshot open like a bullet ready to fire. "You have something to explain," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt, but the anger was starting to swirl in my gut. She glanced up from painting her nails a bright red, the color she used to wear on date nights with me, once upon a time. And then she just looked at the screen, paused with the brush midair, and gave me the most dismissive shrug I'd ever seen. "That's a prank," she said. "You think I would actually do that? John, come on." I wanted to believe her. Her tone was casual, almost bored. But as she reached for a tissue to wipe a dab of polish off her finger, I noticed her hand was trembling. Only slightly, but enough. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Because it doesn't look like a prank. Your name is different, but that's your photo. The description, Rachel, it's worded exactly like you might." She stood up abruptly. "Don't you dare accuse me of something so stupid. Who sent you that? Your friends. They love messing around, making up stories. They'd probably just found a random pic of me online. You know how easy it is to catfish people these days. She was raising her voice, speaking so fast, trying to bury me in her logic. But I picked at the contradictions. So it's a random stolen photo, but it's a new picture with your new hat. Rachel, nobody else took that photo except me. I was there. On the boardwalk in Maine, remember? She froze. A tiny flicker of fear flitted across her face before she turned away. Just stop. You're looking for drama. You're so paranoid. I'm done talking. She brushed past me, leaving the smell of nail polish in her wake. And I stood there, feeling an unsettling swirl of guilt, confusion, and anger. I wanted to chase after her, but something in me just sank. If she was lying, she was better at it than I expected. That was the start. After that night, she became more guarded. Passwords changed on her phone. She came home later from work events. She rolled to the opposite side of the bed, careful not to let me get too close. I told myself I was imagining it, but the sense of betrayal clung to me, a constant ache. Eventually, she stopped pretending. She stopped telling me anything at all. She'd come in late at night, slip out of her clothes in the darkness, and barely nod in my direction before crawling under the covers. The bed felt colder, physically and emotionally, and we'd lie there, two strangers bound by routine, neither making a move. One morning, after I dropped our kids off at school, I parked outside the house, just staring at the steering wheel, my mind racing. The kids had asked me why Mom seemed upset, why she didn't help them with homework the night before, and I'd had no good answer. I realized I was letting everything slip through my fingers, so I decided to check our phone records. That's where I found the repeated calls, the late-night texts, the location pings that put Rachel in places she had no reason to be. And then I found his name. Mark Hayes. He wasn't in her contacts as Mark Hayes, obviously, but that was the name on a couple of receipts I dug up later, hidden under old grocery lists in the kitchen drawer. She'd gone to a fancy hotel near downtown, paid for a spa day and dinner for two. The receipt read, "Reservation under M. Hayes." I confronted her again that evening, cornering her in the living room. I still remember how the light from the floor lamp carved out shadows on her face. She was reading something on her phone, or pretending to. I stepped in front of her. "You booked a spa suite with Mark Hayes?" I asked, voice low, fists clenched to keep from shaking. "That's not a prank. That's an actual printed receipt I found." Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, long enough to give me a grim satisfaction that she was caught. Then she set her phone down slowly and put on the coldest face she could muster. "Stop snooping in my stuff," she said. "You have no right." I threw the receipt onto the coffee table. "I have every right. You're my wife. This is my family. Our children. Don't talk to me about rights." She looked at it, then at me. Something about her expression darkened. "You want the truth, John. Fine. I met Mark. We've seen each other. I was bored. I was lonely. And you were never my choice." That's when she delivered that line that never stopped ringing in my head. I thought I'd break down. I thought I'd scream or lunge or do something stupid. But a numbness spread through me instead. "So that's it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "All these years were just..." "What exactly?" "A mistake." She shrugged again, that infuriating shrug of hers. "They were fine at first, but I never really wanted this life. The kids, the house, the dull weekends. You forced all that on me. I agreed because it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. You were safe." I remember letting out a low, humorless chuckle. "Safe," I repeated. "I can't believe this. You used me for a sense of security." She didn't answer directly. Instead, she grabbed the receipt and crumpled it in her hand. "This conversation is over." Her phone beeped with a text. She snatched it up, ignoring me, ignoring the moment, as if the destruction of our marriage was just a minor inconvenience. The beep repeated. She typed back quickly, her expression lighting up in a way it never did around me anymore. I stood there, my mouth dry, staring at the woman who used to feel like my partner, my confidant, my wife. But now she was a stranger. And in that moment I realized the woman I loved was gone. I saw them together only once. I wish I hadn't. It's burned into my memory, the exact color of the cheap motel wallpaper, the faint smell of stale cigarettes in the hallway, the flickering overhead light. I'd suspected they met at that place occasionally, so I swallowed my pride and drove there one night, heart racing, because I had to see. For my own sanity, I needed confirmation that it wasn't all in my head. When I turned the corner and found the right door -212, I remember it vividly. I heard muted laughter from inside. Her voice. Then a lower register that had to be his. My chest was pounding so hard I was sure they'd hear me. I forced myself to wait, my hand shaking on the doorknob, not sure if I had the guts to burst in. But fate intervened. The door across the hall opened, and a drunken couple stumbled out, giggling. They saw me there, glaring at the door, and gave me a weird look. The woman whispered something to her partner. I realized I looked insane, standing there in the flickering hallway lights, so I pretended to be searching for the right room. They walked off. Suddenly, door 212 opened. Mark stepped out into the hallway. He was shirtless, wearing only jeans. He had a towel draped around his neck, and water glistened on his chest. I froze, and he froze, and for a heartbeat we just stared at each other. His face tightened, an instinctive fear in his eyes. Then Rachel appeared behind him, wrapped in a thin hotel robe, her hair damp, the outline of her body visible under the cheap white fabric. She was laughing at something he'd said, but the laugh died when she saw me. Her eyes went wide, and she pulled the robe closed, as though that might hide the reality I was already staring at. Mark tensed, glancing between us. My muscles coiled, but I didn't move. Couldn't. Instead, I let out a breath that felt like 1,000 knives in my chest. The surreal part was how none of us spoke for a moment. There was just the sound of the flickering light overhead, and my pulse roaring in my ears. Finally, Mark forced a cough. "Look, man, maybe we should." I cut him off with a quiet snarl. "Don't you look, man me." He held his hands up in a placating gesture, backing up a step. I saw a flicker of worry in his eyes. I suppose he thought I'd attack him. Part of me wanted to. But Rachel stepped forward. "This is stupid," she said flatly. She was addressing me. "Why are you here? Spying on me?" I stared at her, a strange calm descending over my rage, the calm that sets in right before something inside you snaps. "I wanted proof," I said. "Now I have it." She rolled her eyes. "I told you I was done explaining." Mark shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing how exposed he was. But he didn't retreat fully. He stood behind her shoulder, a silent testament to the betrayal. My mind whirled, trying to find some anchor. The smell of stale cigarettes and cheap carpet glue washed over me, making me nauseous. "John, this doesn't have to be," she started, but I cut her off. "Save it," I muttered. Then, in a moment of sick clarity, I laughed. "You know, it's almost funny. I never thought you'd sink to a place like this. The Rachel I married had dreams of class, sophistication. And here you are, in this dump with him." She flushed, anger lighting up her face. "Go to hell, John. Maybe I'm already there," I said. "But that's on you." Mark tried to put a hand on her shoulder. "Ratch, let's just—" "Shut up," she snapped at him, then glared back at me. "Fine, you have your proof. Now leave. We're done." I nodded slowly, as though acknowledging a transaction. My gaze lingered on the water droplets clinging to her collarbone. The same neck I once kissed 1,000 times. My heart hammered, but the fury I expected never came. Instead, a hollow sense of finality. "You're right. I said quietly. We are. I walked away then, down that nauseating hallway, ignoring the burn in my eyes. My ears rang with her words, her dismissive tone. I didn't look back. That was the night I realized this marriage was over in every meaningful way. Yet part of me refused to believe it was the real Rachel behind those cold eyes. I kept searching for glimpses of the woman I fell in love with years ago. The woman who once wore that same straw hat while laughing with the kids, the woman who used to sing off-key in the kitchen while making pancakes. I found none. Instead, she dug deeper into her new life, coming and going without explanation, shrugging at my attempts to mend fences. Our kids started to notice. They asked me questions. Why is Mom so mad at you? Why doesn't she hang out with us anymore? I tried to shield them, but kids see through everything. They feel tension like a sixth sense. One day, they came home from school upset because classmates teased them. Your mom's on Tinder, the other kids had said, waving phones with screenshots. The rumor had run through the cafeteria like wildfire. My daughter cried in her room, humiliated. My son locked himself in the bathroom, refusing to talk about it. When I confronted Rachel about it that evening, genuine worry in my voice, she just threw her hands up. That's your fault, she said, refusing to meet my eyes. Mine. I asked, incredulous. You let it get out of hand. You told your friends, and they probably spread it around. If you just let me handle my own business, we wouldn't be here. I let out a harsh laugh. Your own business is wrecking our kids' lives. Don't you care at all? She shot me a scathing look. I won't be guilted into playing the perfect mother anymore. I deserve some happiness too. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. In that moment, I realized how far gone she was. Something fundamental had died in her. And I couldn't fix it. So I did the only thing I could for my children. I planned our escape. For weeks, I quietly made arrangements. I asked for a transfer at work, telling my boss I needed a new start. I gathered documents, froze joint accounts, set aside some emergency cash. I found a small city where no one would ask questions, just a few hours away, but far enough that it would feel like a clean slate for the kids. They were my priority now. I wasn't going to let them live under a cloud of gossip and shame because of their mother's reckless behavior. Rachel barely noticed me packing up important papers. She was too busy texting or disappearing for hours on end. Sometimes she'd come home with the smell of men's cologne clinging to her jacket, not even trying to hide it. And each time, my mind dipped deeper into a dark well of bitterness. But ironically, I still loved her. Isn't that insane? Even as I watched her unravel our life, some part of me clung to the memory of her, hoping she'd snap out of it. Like I was addicted to the version of her I used to know. That's the real cruelty of betrayal. It doesn't kill your love overnight. It poisons it slowly, making you question your own sanity. And sometimes that love lingers even in the face of undeniable fact. At night, I'd lie awake, half listening for her to come home, half hoping she wouldn't. Meanwhile, the kids slept in the next rooms, unaware of the final plan. I'd begun writing a letter to myself, to the man I was 20 years ago, warning him never to marry her, never to fall for her smile. It was a cruel exercise, but it helped me process the rage. I wrote it in my old journal, line after line of everything I wished I could have told my younger self. And I left it open on the desk sometimes, just to remind me that I had to get out. The final straw came one evening when I found her phone on the kitchen counter. I don't know why she left it there, but it lit up with a message from Mark. Coming tonight. Missed you last time. My chest tightened at the familiarity in those words, how casually he spoke about meeting in my absence. I wanted to smash the phone, maybe confront her. But instead, I locked myself in the bedroom, sank onto the bed, and laughed. A broken, bitter laugh. Because it was so brazen, so unbelievably blatant, that I couldn't even muster tears. I was past heartbreak, living in some twisted realm of black humor, where all you can do is laugh at your own misery. I texted him back from her phone. Just one line. He won't matter soon. Then I set the phone down, turned off the light, and stared at the ceiling until I drifted into a tormented sleep. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. It was time. That night, when she came home at midnight, I was awake, waiting in the living room. She walked in, stifling a yawn, her hair disheveled, her lipstick half faded. Her eyes flashed with annoyance when she saw me. "What?" she said, tossing her bag on the couch. "You said I never mattered," I replied evenly. "So I'm leaving. Tomorrow morning. I'm taking the kids with me." She blinked. "Don't be dramatic." I smiled, a hollow twist of my lips. "This isn't drama. It's fact. I already enrolled them in a new school. We're leaving first thing. I just wanted to give you a heads up so you don't freak out when you find the house empty." She snorted, as if I'd just told her a lame joke. "Sure you are." I shrugged. "Suit yourself." I stood, ready to go to bed, but paused a second. "Rachel, this is your last chance to say something. Anything that might stop me. Because once I'm gone, I'm gone." For the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes. Maybe fear, maybe regret. But it vanished almost immediately. She threw up her hands. "Whatever, John. I made my choice. You do you." I let out a slow breath, then turned off the lamp. "Right. Good night." She didn't reply, just left the room. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, her door closing, and I waited in the darkness, the final confirmation etched into my brain. She truly didn't care. I was up all night, packing the last of our necessities. Documents, passports, my laptop, clothes. The kids were asleep, blissfully unaware of the upheaval about to happen, though they'd known I was planning to move them. They just didn't realize it'd be so abrupt. I looked at their small faces, so peaceful in the glow of the night light, and felt a pang in my chest. We'd talk in the car, I decided. We'd sort out the details once we were on the road. I turned off my phone, called the bank to finalize the freeze on the joint accounts, left the keys to the house in an envelope on the dining table, along with one piece of paper, my letter to myself, folded in half. On the outside of it, I wrote to John at 20 in big bold letters. If she ever found it, maybe she'd read it. Maybe she'd understand how thoroughly she'd wrecked us. Or maybe she'd just shrug and toss it out. Before dawn, I quietly guided the kids into the car. They were groggy, half scared, half excited, looking at me with wide eyes. "Dad, where's Mom?" my daughter whispered. I forced a reassuring smile. "She's sleeping. We'll talk later, okay? Let's go." I didn't slam any doors, didn't make a scene. I just drove away into the darkness, heading to a new city where nobody knew our shame, where the kids might finally breathe again without hearing rumors about their mother's Tinder escapades. The days that followed were a blur. I focused on settling the kids into their new environment, throwing myself into the logistics of our new life. We found a small place to rent, enough rooms for comfort, near a decent school. I explained the situation to them in the gentlest terms I could. Told them Mom needed time alone, that we had to keep our heads high and support each other. It wasn't easy. My son asked me if I hated her now. I didn't know what to say. Because the truth was, I still loved her in some twisted way, but I also resented her with every fiber of my being. I kept my phone off for the first week, not wanting to see any messages she might send. The bank accounts were all in my name now. My paycheck continued to arrive in a separate account I'd set up. I was certain she'd be furious, or maybe relieved. I didn't really care anymore. I needed distance. Occasionally, I'd catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror at night and barely recognize the man staring back. Dark circles under my eyes. A grim set to my jaw. But also a sense of purpose. I was protecting my children from a toxic situation. For the first time in months, I felt something close to calm. People said later that Rachel told her friends she kicked me out, that it was her decision all along. They told me she was going around claiming she'd needed a clean break from me. Some believed her, some didn't. I was past the point of caring. The world can think what it wants. But apparently, not a tear was shed on her part. What haunted me more was that memory of the photograph. The one of her with that other kid, probably a relative of Mark's, or maybe a friend's son. No clue. But the way she wore that straw hat, the same hat we bought on that family trip to Maine, felt like a final betrayal. The last piece of our shared past twisted into something so foreign. She'd replaced us. In that photo, she looked so carefree, as if I'd never existed. And I realized that's exactly how she wanted it. A month later, when I'd finally turned my phone back on, there were no calls or texts from Rachel. Nothing. No apologies, no outraged demands for me to return. It confirmed what I already knew. She didn't want us back. She was done. She'd fully stepped into her new life, with new men, new adventures, new everything. I sometimes wondered if she missed the kids at all. But she never reached out. Not once. That stung more than any single argument we ever had. I tried to keep a sense of humor about it. Morbid humor, maybe. I told myself, at least now you don't have to listen to her snoring or nagging. I joked with a new coworker that being single again at my age gave me a chance to finally learn how to salsa dance. But the jokes rang hollow. Late at night, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table, stare at the blank walls of our modest rental, and remember how once upon a time, I thought we were building a forever home. I'd run my fingers over the ring on my left hand before I realized I was still wearing it. And that made me laugh in the emptiest way. Because part of me still felt married. Part of me still wanted her to walk through that door, roll her eyes at me for making a mess, and then let me wrap my arms around her. I guess that's what a decade and a half of marriage does. It burrows into you, rewriting your instincts until you can't quite erase them in a single stroke. Till one night, my daughter asked me quietly, "Dad, do you still love Mom?" We were in the living room, folding laundry. She was being so brave, helping me in the ways she knew how. "Yeah," I said, not looking up from the socks. "I do, honey. I love the person she used to be." My daughter nodded, her eyes sad. "Will she ever come back?" I hesitated, searching for a kinder lie, but none came. "I don't think so." She swallowed and gave me a shaky nod, as though accepting a harsh fact of life. My heart broke for her. She was too young to be dealing with the complexity of betrayal. I wanted to spare her all that, but reality rarely cares about our desires. Some nights, I dreamed about the day I gave Rachel that hat in Maine. We were on the beach, the kids playing in the sand. She tried on a plain straw hat and spun around, laughing. "Do I look ridiculous?" she'd asked. I told her she looked perfect. That memory was so vivid. The breeze off the ocean, the gulls calling overhead, the shining grin on her face. That was a lifetime ago. When I woke from those dreams, the bed felt colder than ever, and I'd fight the wave of sadness rising in my chest. I'd get up, splash water on my face, and remind myself, this is your life now. She's gone, by her own choice. I heard rumors that she posted pictures on social media with Mark Hayes, traveling to fun spots, living it up. It felt like an echo from a parallel universe. I stopped letting myself check. Instead, I poured all my energy into my new job, into the kids' schooling, into building a routine that felt stable. And bit by bit, day by day, I found a fragile sense of normalcy. But a part of me never fully recovered. How could it? When the person you trust most in the world throws you away like you're nothing, that leaves a scar. I masked the pain with grim jokes. Sometimes at work, a coworker would mention marriage, and I'd just say something dry like, "If you want to keep your sanity, never buy your wife a straw hat at the beach." They'd laugh, not understanding the deeper cut. I reached out to my parents eventually, explaining as vaguely as possible that Rachel and I had separated. They were shocked, but supportive. My mother said something about how Rachel always seemed restless, which I didn't recall her ever mentioning before. Hindsight can be cruel. Our new neighborhood wasn't flashy, but it was quiet. The kids started making friends. They still asked about their mom from time to time, and each time I gave them the gentlest honesty I could manage. She's living her own life now, and we have to do the same, I'd say. That was all I had to offer. I stayed up one evening finishing that letter to my younger self. I scribbled the final lines. Don't mistake comfort for love. If you do, you might end up like me, haunted by the ghost of a woman who never really wanted you. It was harsh, but it was my truth. I folded the letter and tucked it into the back of my drawer, next to old photographs. Maybe one day I'd burn it. For now, it was my only testament to what I'd endured. Months passed. I never returned to the old house. We left it empty, a shell, with a mortgage that Rachel would have to sort out if she bothered. I'd refinance what I could in my name, leaving her the rest. Maybe she'd let it go into foreclosure. Maybe not. I was done caring. I never answered her calls, if she made any. I never saw a single voicemail from her. Possibly she never tried. Possibly she was too busy forging her new identity. She'd always craved excitement. I suppose she found it, in spades. Now and then, I'd imagine her bragging to her friends, telling them how it was all her plan, how she'd always wanted out. That's what people said. That she took credit for me leaving. That she turned herself into some triumphant figure, free at last. None of it changed the truth. She never once tried to bring us back. She never asked about the kids. She never even shed a tear, from what I heard. In the mornings, I'd wake up, look at the sunlight through the curtains, and wonder if I should regret marrying her. A quiet voice in my head whispered, "But you got two amazing kids out of it." And that was the only silver lining I needed. They were worth everything. Every heartbreak, every sleepless night. I had them, and that meant I hadn't wasted my life entirely. I got them up, packed lunches, drove them to school, listened to them chat about new friends. They were healing in their own way. Kids are resilient, though they carry scars we can't always see. My daughter still looked at old pictures sometimes, but she never cried in front of me again. My son tried to be stoic, maybe emulating my own guardedness. We had each other's backs. That was the best I could offer them. I found work surprisingly rewarding after the move. My new colleagues didn't know the baggage I carried, and that anonymity helped. I threw myself into projects, came home exhausted, spent the evenings being the best father I could. We still had tough moments, questions about Mom, about whether we'd ever return to that old life. But we marched on. Sometimes, late at night, I pictured Rachel in that empty hallway of the motel again, wearing a flimsy robe with water running down her neck, Mark behind her, and I'd feel a flash of rage or sorrow. But then I'd push it away, let out a low laugh to myself. My brand of black humor had become my shield. At least she can't complain about my snoring if we're not in the same bed. It sounds pathetic, but it kept me from drowning in bitterness. Kai heard from a mutual acquaintance that Rachel tried to brag about deciding to end the marriage, telling people she was better off alone. But apparently, more than a few of her friends had witnessed her cold dismissal of me and the kids, saw how little she cared about us leaving. Word got around. It seemed not everyone believed her version of events. Some grew distant. Maybe they saw a side of her they never suspected. I found it oddly satisfying, in a quiet way, that she couldn't rewrite the truth entirely. But I never publicly corrected her or told my side. I didn't need that drama. My focus was on building a new life, forging a stable environment for my kids. Not long ago, I discovered that old straw hat in a box I'd brought from the house. I pulled it out with a feeling of dread and fascination. It was battered from sun and wind, frayed around the edges. Once, it had been a symbol of our happy days by the ocean. Now, it was just a relic of a love that never was. For a moment, I considered throwing it in the trash. But then I set it on top of the box, walked outside to the dumpster behind our building, and dropped it in with the rest of the waste. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Sometimes, my mind drifts to the day I left that letter on the table for her, my note to my younger self. She probably never bothered to read it. Or maybe she did, and laughed, or got angry, or didn't care. But in the end, it was more for me than for her. A final way to say, this is over. I'm done with your lies. And so here I am, months after the big exit, living in a modest rented house with my children, forging a life from the shards left behind. I'm not claiming it's perfect. I miss the illusions I had of a wife who loved me, of a future that was stable and real. But illusions can only sustain you for so long. Rachel remains a phantom in our lives. Sometimes I catch glimpses of her on social media if I accidentally stumble upon a friend's post. She's out at parties, wearing that same self-assured grin, as though none of this ever touched her. No mention of me, no mention of our kids. Maybe that's how she wants it. Maybe that's how she copes. At first it hurt. I hated that she could just pretend we didn't exist. But as time goes on, I realize it doesn't matter. She's the one who has to live with herself, if she feels any guilt at all. Late last night, I found myself rereading a line I jotted down in my journal. Don't let her see you bleed. I used to think that was a tough guy phrase, meaningless bravado. But now it resonates. Because I did bleed. I bled internally from the moment I caught her profile online to the day I drove away with our children. And yet I tried not to show it. She saw anger, she saw confusion, but I tried my hardest never to show her how utterly broken she left me. I think that was my final victory. Leaving on my terms, refusing to kneel and beg for scraps of affection she wasn't willing to give. The bottom line. I did love her. Maybe I still do in some corner of my heart. But love alone can't fix the damage she caused. Love can't patch up the holes left by betrayal. Not when the betrayer isn't even willing to meet you halfway. Sometimes, for a split second, I find myself in the grocery store, scanning the produce aisle, and I swear I see her out of the corner of my eye. Hair tumbling down her shoulders, the shape of her waist that I knew by heart. My chest tightens, and I whip my head around, half expecting to find her waiting for me. But it's never her, just a stranger who looks vaguely similar. Then I exhale and push the cart forward, shaking off the ghost. That's my reality now. Living with the echoes of a woman who threw away our life without a second thought. I wonder if one day she'll call and ask about the kids, or if she'll bother to see them again. I don't have the answer. My guess is no, but if she does, I'll let the kids make that choice. I'm done making decisions for her. I'm done giving her any more of my energy. She used up her share. My final memory of Rachel is from the morning we left. She was asleep upstairs, the faint hum of her snore drifting into the hallway. I stood outside our bedroom door, suitcase in hand, kids behind me, and I had this overwhelming urge to wake her, maybe share one last conversation, see if there was a final spark of regret. But I didn't. I turned away and walked out without a backward glance. I haven't spoken to her since. That was the best I could do. A clean cut, no more illusions. I hear from friends that she sometimes jokes about me, calling me the dull one, making me out to be an obstacle she had to overcome to find her real happiness. Let her talk. A woman who cared more about cheap motel rooms and short-term thrills than her own children's well-being isn't someone whose opinion I value anymore. And so, life goes on. I still wear the same watch my father gave me years ago, the one that reminds me life is too short to waste on regrets. I still get up in the morning, shuffle around in my slippers, make coffee, see my kids off to school. At work, I'm the reliable one, the man who keeps things running. People look at me and maybe think I'm just an average middle-aged guy with no big drama in his life. They don't know the nuclear meltdown I survived, but that's okay. I don't need them to know. I've made my peace with the wreckage. Every so often, I smile to myself, because in a twisted way, I'm proud I walked out without the screaming match, without the violence. I took my children and gave them a chance at a quieter life. That's my form of revenge. Living well, or at least better than the chaos she dragged us through. The memories still haunt me, especially that damned photo of her with someone else's child, wearing the hat that was supposed to be a sweet little token of our love. But I remind myself that photograph doesn't define me or my kids. It just shows the distance she was willing to go. And if that's who she truly is, then maybe I never knew her to begin with. Does this story have a happy ending? That depends on what you call happy. I'm alive. The kids are healing. I have my self-respect. I guess, for a man in my position, that's as close to happy as it gets. There's no triumphant reunion, no redemption for her. But there's also no more lies. No more nights spent wondering who she's with and why she doesn't come home. I'm free from all that. Maybe that's the final punchline to this bitter joke. I loved her despite everything. But she didn't love me back enough to even pretend once the truth was out. Now I'm left with a story that still stings, but it's mine alone. And day by day, that sting fades. As for Rachel, maybe her new men and her new flings satisfy her craving for attention. Maybe she'll always search for the next thrill. That's her path. She can keep it. My path is here, in this smaller house, with my children's laughter echoing in the yard, the memory of betrayal fading into the background. I'll let the old wounds become scars, proof that I survived. Because, in the end, that's what matters. I'm still standing, and I've still got enough love left in me to protect what's mine. That's all I need.